friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Becky. I've had type 1 diabetes for 17 years now, so I was diagnosed back when I was 7 years old, and I thought I would film a video for parents of kids with type 1 diabetes, as I kind of have been reflecting back on my childhood with diabetes and things that my parents did to help support me in managing my diabetes, but also coming to accept my diagnosis of type 1 diabetes, and just share some kind of tips and things that I found personally useful. Obviously all of this is my own opinion, going off of my own personal experience, things that my parents did, and I'm in no way telling you how to parent your child or what I think is the right way, but just from the perspective of a child with type 1 diabetes who has now grown up and has been living with the condition for a really long time. First thing I would say is just educate yourself as much as possible on both the day-to-day management of diabetes and also new innovations like new tech and new research, so that your child isn't the one that's having to go and do that. Obviously completely depends how old they are as to how involved they want to be and can be with their diabetes, and looking at their possible options. But one of the main things for me was my parents took as much of the burden off of me as possible, especially at the beginning, while still giving me those tools to manage the day-to-day things. And then bigger decisions, obviously I was 7 years old, so they could kind of take those over and research and become as informed as possible. And alongside the educating yourself, that also comes with the point of being a real advocate for your child, especially when it comes to things like tech, like pumps and CGMs, advocating and putting forward your case as to why you need them to get the best possible diabetes supplies and technology for your child is really, really important. One thing I found when I was a kid, I was very against anything that would be stuck on me to show that I was diabetic, so I didn't get a pump for a really long time, and it's actually much harder to be prescribed things like CGMs and pumps once you're an adult. So if you can start that process while they're a child, first of all, there's much fewer criteria you need to hit when you have a type 1 diabetic child in order to get these things, so it's much easier for you, and also puts your kid in good stead to understand these technologies, to become accustomed to them, and to start really using them to their advantage as early on as possible into their kind of life with diabetes, rather than getting by on what they have kind of just been given as standard for a really long time. It took me about 15 years to get a CGM and 14 years to get a CGM and 16 years to get a pump, and my management would have been a heck of a lot better had I accepted these things into my life a lot earlier. One thing I would say on the flip side of that is, if you do decide to do something like get a CGM for your child, which I think is an amazing piece of tech that you can really benefit from, especially when you have things like data sharing, so you can get alarms and alerts for your child's blood sugar, is if you do get that, to not become a micromanager and try as hard as you can not to try and really helicopter over their blood sugars. Use it more as a tool so you can be informed like in case of emergency in the moment, but don't look for your child to have perfect blood sugars, because it's not going to happen, and you also want to make sure your kid is just living as a free, playing, running, enjoying life child, and micromanaging diabetes doesn't necessarily come under that kind of umbrella. And so using the CGM for emergencies, so you get alarmed when things do go wrong, but also you taking on the burden to step back and analyse the data like weekly or monthly, and work out new strategies that you can implement, whether it's pre-bolus timings, whether it's insulin to carb ratios or correction factors that need adjusting. You can go back and, depending on the age of your child, either do all that analysis yourself and then implement it if they're really young, or if your child is at the age where they can do insulin doses and calculations themselves, you then putting in the groundwork to do a lot of that analysis yourself, and then taking your child through that, so that when they're young, they don't have this massive burden of having to do in-depth analysis themselves, but by you showing them what you're doing and how you're learning from their numbers, they then have the tools to then learn how to do it themselves when they are at the age when that is appropriate. Obviously you should get loads and loads of help from your diabetes clinic, but feasibly each clinic cannot give each child that one-on-one very, very detailed in-depth analysis of their blood sugars every week of every month, and so as a person with diabetes, it's something you have to take on yourself. And if you are a child where you are unable to do that, your parent needs to be able to kind of step in and do that task for you, without it becoming a form of pressure that you're expecting your kid to hit a certain time and target every single day. Instead, it's used as a tool to analyse and see where you can do better, and see how you can adjust boluses and basals to allow your kid to then eat the pizza and go to a birthday party and eat the birthday cake. It's about using that data to give your kid the freedom to enjoy things like other kids would do, while not expecting it to always go to plan and for everything to always be perfect. By taking off that pressure to expect always perfect blood sugars, not only are you taking some of the burden off of yourself, you're also making it much easier for your child to then have an open dialogue with you and explain where things have gone wrong and where they want help, and you can then work together to create solutions to those problems. So something you can do as a parent for a child with type 1 diabetes is just make sure that it's really clear that there is always an open channel of communication about diabetes, with no expectations of what they should be doing, no form of shame around bad blood sugars or high blood sugars or low blood sugars, and that you're just there to provide a sounding board, to provide advice, but never to like tell them off or shame them about a situation where maybe blood sugars went a bit high. It's about learning and adapting rather than putting shame on those kind of numbers. And with that open sense of dialogue, it's likely there will be a lot of emotions come out from time to time. I know when I was young, I had a couple of breakdowns about my diabetes where I just didn't want it. I didn't understand why I had it. My mum would cry because she wanted to take it away from me. She was always like, I wish I could have this instead of you. But it is likely that there's going to be a lot of high emotions around diabetes, and it's about creating that space to allow your child to vent, to cry, to be upset about things, so that then day to day they can start to accept their diagnosis and feel okay in themselves as a type 1 diabetic, and feel empowered to manage their diabetes to the best of their ability and to live life as a normal child, knowing that home and parents are always a safe space to unload emotions and just let it all out. And on that emotional side of things, one thing I think is a really powerful tool as a parent of a child with type 1 diabetes is to actively go out and see what your options are for a paediatric diabetic psychologist. These are not always available. I was really lucky that in my clinic we had a psychologist as part of the clinician team until a few years ago when their funding got cut, which I think is absolutely devastating, but she was amazing. And even if you think your child doesn't need a psychologist right now, sometimes it's good to just have like regular appointments with them if it's kind of within your capabilities to do that, just so your child can stay on top of their emotions regarding their diabetes, but also to know where a clinician is and where things like psychologists and counsellors are available in case you do get to that point where you need one right now. It's good to know where those options are in advance in case anything does come up in terms of their emotions with their diabetes. So just being aware of that and being proactive can save you a lot of stress in the long run. And the reason I say that is because I suffered with a diabetes related eating disorder for a couple of years, which is why I ended up seeing that child psychologist. And a lot of that stemmed from a lot of clinical language around food and around carbohydrates and things like that. So I think as a parent, it's really important to get a very solid understanding of nutrition and how you can incorporate all foods into your child's diet so that they feel safe and comfortable and okay to eat what they want to eat, know that it's fine, and just have different basal and bolus strategies in place. Don't put strict rules on foods and food groups and types of food and restricting certain food groups and anything like that. I think having strict rules where it's like this food is an absolute no, unless obviously you're like allergic or something, can be quite damaging, especially to a young child. It was for me. And having that open dialogue around food, again, around feelings around food, but also knowing that there's nothing off limits, and instead you two can work together to find strategies to be able to enjoy these foods. And alongside that comes kind of my next point, which is to always prioritise your child's freedom. I think it's important as a parent of a child with type 1 diabetes to feel safe in the knowledge that your child can look after themselves, or whoever's looking after them can do a sufficient job, to allow you to then allow your child to go and do whatever they want to do, and to never stop your child from doing something just because of the diabetes. There's always a workaround, there's always strategies you can implement to make sure that your kid can enjoy everything that any other kid in their class can enjoy. My mum used to make a cheat sheet of very basic information that she would give to all of my teachers, and then any parent who I was going to theirs for like a sleepover with like my friends or whatever, so that both the adult responsible for me in that moment as well as my parents felt safe with me being away from my mum and dad, and being able to manage my diabetes without them. It would be really basic things like, if the blood sugar drops to this, do this, what to do in an emergency. Obviously it was like, always phone me if you're unsure. If there is an emergency, I will be here, but this is immediate action you can take. If she faints, this is what you do. Not that it was ever a very likely situation, but just so that there's an understanding of things that the responsible adult can do in case of emergency, reminding them that my parents are always just a phone call away, not putting any burden on the parent or the teacher to manage my diabetes, because that would just be out of the question, but empowering them to know that they are safe looking after me. And then I just have two last little tips. So the first one is to look out for a diabetes camp and get your kid on one as soon as possible. I only ever went to one that was run by my diabetes clinic. We went away for a couple of nights and it was just so good because I got to socialise with other kids who had diabetes. We all understood each other, but it was just like a normal adventure camp, so it was like anything else any kid would ever do, but my parents were safe in the knowledge that I was being looked after by a team of type 1 diabetes specialists. It was probably the first like night away that they ever sent me on where they actually felt completely relaxed, and that they didn't have to worry about me screwing up my diabetes or something. So it allowed my parents that peace of mind to have a true like couple of nights away from managing my diabetes for me, but it was so great for me because I could meet other diabetic kids. We had so much fun, and we could all kind of share like how we were feeling about our diabetes, and it was just amazing. So I would always recommend a diabetes camp. And the next thing I would mention is something that my parents didn't do because it wasn't really a thing back then, but get on social media. I love the type 1 diabetes community. I connect with so many people with type 1 diabetes, and we all share so much advice, but there's equally an amazing opportunity, amazing community for parents of kids with type 1 diabetes, or even if you are a parent of a child with type 1 diabetes, follow a load of like type 1 diabetics, and just ask for advice, share your worries, see what other type 1 diabetics are doing. And I'm not saying like take their word for gospel, I'm not saying you should change everything you do to eat and drink and inject exactly the same as I do, because no two people's diabetes are the same, but just seeing like different techniques and advice and how different people handle different situations can be a world of good, especially when diabetes can be so temperamental. Just having that extra knowledge and extra experience that you can learn from other people has been amazing. So getting on social media is such a good tool. That is it for this video. I hope my experiences and my opinions have been helpful. Obviously, like I said at the beginning, I'm not telling you how to parent your child, and you don't have to do anything that I've just said. These are just things that from my personal experience were really helpful to me, and things that I think can help both the child who is diabetic and the parent who's having to look after them, to help take off as much of the burden from the both of you as possible. So if you have any advice for parents of type 1 diabetic children, please leave it in the comments down below. I always like to start a little thread of helpful tips down there for anyone else who's looking or has any further insights. But that is it for now, and I will see you soon. Bye.